Yeah. I think they make our meetings too long. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Neal. I'm the city manager in Edina, and I want to welcome you to tonight's Town Talk. This year, we have planned a series of town talks around important topics, including the City of Edina's 2020-2021 budget work plan and the four primary pillars of our work plan, which are strong foundation, reliable service, livable city, and better together. Tonight's presentation is about the city's demography changes and our race and equity work. Race and Equity Coordinator Heidi Lee will talk about the city's work in this area and discuss the collection of data and give a glimpse into the future work plan initiatives. Heidi will speak to us for about 30 minutes. After her presentation, she will take questions, and we will end tonight's Town Talk when there are no more questions or at 8 o'clock, whichever one comes first. However, you can continue to ask questions and make comments online at bettertogether.org for the next week. The online conversation closes on Tuesday, August 3rd. Now I would like to formally introduce Heidi, who has been our Race and Equity Coordinator since 2019. Prior to working in Edina, she worked for the St. Paul Public Schools as a project coordinator in the Office of Equity. In both these positions, Heidi's roles have ranged from facilitating training sessions, providing equity plan support, and partnering with stakeholders to move equity forward. Please help me welcome Heidi Lee. Heidi.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me to share some information about the changing demographics in the city of Edina, as well as looking forward to what the race and equity work looks like in the city. For your viewing pleasure, you have the agenda for tonight, which was the introduction by Scott, as well as taking a look at the past and the historical data, as well as the census data and the quality of life survey. Then we will move on to the present, which is looking at the race and equity work in the city and looking at the three different buckets of work, which is training, work plan, and engagement, as well as looking at the future of how to advance the race and equity work in the city. So what you have in front of you is the U.S. Census data. And the U.S. Census data is showing the span from 1980 until 2016 of the changing demographics. In 1980, there was 46,073 people. And of those amount, it is roughly about 97% white folks. And really thinking about how has that changed. And when you look over to the right of 51,804 residents. And at that time in 2016, it is around 87%. As you look at the key at the very bottom, you'll notice that the blue is representative of white folks. And as from 1980 until 2016, you'll notice a shift. With the shift, you have other folks from racial backgrounds such as Black, American Indian, Asian, multiracial, Hispanic, Latino, as well as other races. And so that is kind of the premise when I think about race and equity work in Edina, is how to be responsive to the changing demographics of the community members. And as I look forward to the data, this is also census data, and this is the population estimates on July 1st of 2019. As you've noticed that there is a growth in the population estimate, which is 52,857 people in Edina. When I think about race and equity, it's also looking at the other identity characteristics of other folks. And so what you'll see here is listed is the population, and the population in percentage. So with that population of 52,857 people in Edina, 65 years of older are representative in 52.1%. Those that are under 5 years old are representative in 5.9%. And then 18 and under is 23.5. And so really looking at the percentage or the data that the U.S. Census is collecting. They have their own way of collecting data to be able to inform how funds from the federal government should be used for communities, as well as looking at the housing Senate seats. In addition to this, with the race and equity, or excuse me, the race and ethnicity in percentages, you'll notice that it is projected at 84.2% white folks. So thinking about the previous slide where it was around 87% in 2016. So that shift even in 3 years for the racial demographics. In 2019, it is also estimated that 2.6% of the population in Edina are identifying as Black or African American. American Indian and Alaskan Native alone are 0.2% of the estimated population from the US Census. 7.6% have identified themselves as Asian alone. And while there is a category of Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander alone, there has not been anything or any folks that have identified themselves in the Edina population. With that, there is 2.6% of the population in Edina that have self-identified as being 2 or more races. And then 2.6% of the population are Hispanic or Latino. And the reason why I say self-identified is really thinking about that with the census, folks are able to identify their racial identity. And so it's also taking a look at what is the feedback from the community when race and equity work is being focused on. So moving along from the census data, I want to show the quality of life survey. And the quality of life survey has been taken since 2011, 2013, 2015, 2017, 2019, and 2021. And so you'll notice that there's a pattern that the quality of life survey has been taken every 2 years. With the quality of life survey, there has been definitely changes in reporting or identification as well as questions. And so I want to be able to take you through some of these pieces when I think about changing demographics. Because as changing demographics are showing, it's also showing that language and racial identity as well as categorization are changing as well. So there are going to be some gaps in the data. However, that is part of the race and equity work in the city, is to really look at what are their gaps and how are we responsive to that. So for example, in 2013, of the folks that went ahead and were sent a quality of life survey, which was actually at that time the last time that a phone survey was done. So there's 400 folks in Edina that were contacted via phone and asked these questions in 2013. So of the 400, 3% had racially identified themselves as African American or Black. And in 5% in 2013 have self-identified as Asian or Pacific Islander. And the reason why I want to have you take a look at that particular line is because in 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2019, that was the racial category that was on the quality of life survey. However, taking into account that race as well as language changes is very fluid. And so if you look on the 5th line down where it says Asian and Asian Indian, has in a sense replaced that categorization of Asian and Pacific Islander. So while there are gaps in that particular line for Asian and Pacific Islander in 2021 where there is that asterisk, that categorization has then become Asian or Asian Indian in 2021. And so really looking at that with some of these that you will notice is that there's going to be changing language of how people identify. For example, we have in 2013, it was listed as biracial or multiracial. With the quality of life surveys, people have the opportunity to self-identify their racial identity, and some of these totals in percentage can vary because people are able to select multi-racial identifiers. So there is definitely information when I look at the quality of life survey just to be able to see what are the changing demographics within Edina as well as the US Census. When I think of race and equity, it's not just race, it's also an intersection. And so one of the reasons why I'm showing this particular survey response is age. Thinking about who is in the community, thinking about the age of the folks and being able to be adaptive. So what you'll notice that in this particular graph here, in 2013, the age range went from 18 to 65 and over. So really looking at that to be more inclusive of folks that are 75 or older, that particular categorization was added in 2015. So really just expanding what are the needs of the community members as well. So this is the data from 2013 until 2021 of the age groups in the city of Edina. Another aspect of equity is also taking a look at gender and to be able to look at the changing demographics. And so you'll notice that in 2013 through 2017, there was a gap or an asterisk on the third option, which is prefer to identify in a different way, knowing that folks are able to decide their own gender identity. That was also added in 2019. So really thinking about that with race and equity work, it is very inclusive of multiple identities that people have. And another data point that I'd like to show you for quality of life survey is one of the questions was, please rate how welcoming Edina is as a community. In the three rows that you'll notice that have an asterisk, for people of all religions, for people of all races, for people of all ethnicities, that was not asked in the 2019 quality of life survey. However, in the 2019 quality of life survey, people were asked to rate how welcoming Edina is to those folks that have lower income. And so 29% of the respondents that were asked in 2019, which was 1,500, and we received a response of 427 folks. So 29% of 427 people indicated that they think that Edina is welcoming for folks that have lower income. And in 2021, for the quality of life surveys, those three additional responses were asked. And so of the 518 respondents of the quality of life survey, 63% had indicated that Edina is welcoming to those folks of all religion. 54% of the 518 had indicated that Edina is 54% welcoming to people of all races. And then 54% again have indicated that Edina is welcoming for all ethnicities. And then the last one is 38% for people who have lower income. And with this particular data set, this is one of the driving forces when I think about race and equity work, is how to be able to build in a welcome and inclusive community, as the motto or the mission is for Edina. And so really thinking about how to be adaptive in that space. The last quality of life survey response that I want to show you is what is the overall feel or the response from community members when it comes to the race and equity or diversity and inclusiveness of a city. And so you'll notice that in 2013 as well as 2015, there was not a question of asking that. But again, looking at what has shifted in the city's vision for race and equity, it was asked in 2017 as well as 2019 and 2021. And when I look at these these answers, in 2017, we have at least 56% of the folks that answered the survey as indicating that diversity and inclusiveness is essential or very important. And in 2019, again, 56% have also indicated that it's important. As we're taking a look at 2021, there is an increase. 68% of the folks that were surveyed had indicated that it is important to have a diverse and inclusive city. And really thinking about with this particular data set, that is one of the driving forces, again, of the race and equity work. And so as I think about this, I want to talk a little bit about the race and equity work that is happening in the city, and also give you the vision of what that looks like. And so as we go into this, I want to just front load the city's commitment. And this is the City Council value statement. And this is also on the city website for the council values. And so I'll go ahead and read it. As the Edina City Council, we are dedicated to creating an environment in our community where residents have equitable opportunities to participate in their city government and access the city's institution, facilities, and services. Our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion will be a continuous process of learning and adapting to the multiple needs of all of the community, while consistently applying an equity lens in all decisions and interactions. Our vision of a welcoming Edina includes removing systemic and institutional barriers to create opportunities for all in the community to thrive. And so that is part of that grounding work when the city is looking at race and equity work. So with race and equity work, it has been separated into 3 different buckets of work. The work plan, which involves work plan development and support and coaching. And another bucket is training, which involves professional development and facilitation, and engagement, which involves the community as well as the racial equity advancement team. And so with the next slides, I will be going ahead and providing examples of that. And so what you see in front of you is the graph that I provided to City Council for an update of the race and equity implementation plan. And so with the city having 59 items that were recommended by the Race and Equity Task Force in 2015 based on their research of how to be able to have more of an equitable and inclusive community. They had presented that to City Council, and City Council had received that, as well as getting feedback from staff members of what can be accomplished in the timeline. And so in 2018, City Council had approved that implementation plan. And so staff are also doing race and equity work within their departments and providing updates to the City Council every quarter. And so what you'll notice here is that in this particular slide, it will show you the status of all of that. I am happy to report that by the end of 2021, 80% of those items will be completed. And with those items, some of those are larger items as well as very technical items. And for example, one of the items that I'll be showing is the Yancey Park renaming dedication, which involved not just doing the work plan, but also really the community feedback and just listening to what the needs are of the community to be able to honor the Yancey family. And so with a race and equity work plan, the implementation plan was a guiding document for staff members of this is what the community wants in order to be able to do race and equity work. And as we're transitioning into the future, it will be having departments and divisions create their own race and equity work plan so that there's building capacity. And with building capacity, that not only includes the work plan, but it also includes training and professional development. And what you see in front of you here is an example of training that is provided to be able to build capacity within staff members. And staff members are able to go through a grow training where they are able to take a look at the different process of change. And so what you see here is an example of that. And so staff members have an opportunity to think about their experiences with race and how it impacts. And so they're in the center, how their self-experiences impact their interpersonal relationships, whether it is with community members or with each other. And then really thinking about their institutional impact. So that institutional impact can go from departments to divisions, and really thinking about how their self-experiences, their relationships impact their decision making. And then ultimately with their decision making, they're able to see what is the impact on the system. And so staff members have that opportunity to look at that, to get greater knowledge, to be able to build capacity so that when they are making decisions with a race and equity lens, it will be looking at what is good for all. And then the last part of the work plan, or the buckets of work, is really the engagement piece. It's really how to continue those conversations, how to work with community members to further race and equity. And what I have in front of you is the stories we share, which is on Better Together Edina, where community members, staff members have been able to share their experiences on race so that it continues a conversation. And then again, going to Yancey Park, where that was on the Race and Equity Work Plan, and the Human Rights and Relations, as well as the Parks and Rec Commission, work together to do research to say what is a good facility, what is a good city facility to be able to rename so that it can be honored. And so really thinking about that, with the race and equity work, there's many moving parts to be able to further that work. And as we're furthering that work, it's really looking forward and how do we advance the race and equity work, which is to build a data collection model. How are we ensuring that the work through race and equity is qualitative, to be able to show the impact of the race and equity work. And that qualitative model also allows us to see, is this the work that we should be doing? If we need to do something different, how do we have data to support that? Again, it's also taking a look at the quality of life survey, feedback from community members, as well as the US Census. And as I said earlier, advancing the race and equity work is also supporting that work plan creation. So how are departments and divisions being able to determine their race and equity work plan and to be able to build capacity? And so that is part of the race and equity, as well as how it impacts the changing demographics.
Okay, I don't know if this is, there we go. Is this the microphone you're going to use in the audience too, Jen? No, okay. So we will stand for, hi Carolyn Jackson, City Council member. So we will stand for questions right now. Primarily Heidi, I think, stand for questions. If you have a question, there aren't too many people in the audience, so raise your hand or blurt it out. And Jen's got a microphone that we can share. We'll take questions however many we have, or until 8 o'clock, whichever comes first.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Ms. Lee, Director Lee, for your presentation. It was very good. I have two questions, and I'll just ask both of them, and then you can answer them as you would. First of all, we talk about being welcoming, and one of the things that I've heard in the community is how can you be welcoming, especially to lower income people, when the cost of housing here is so high, and how are we defining welcoming? And then the second question is, Edina is part of a greater metropolitan region, and to what extent is the work that you're doing looking at our role in this region, what kind of regional work are you doing? Because I think one of the reasons Edina looks the way it is because of its impact on people in the region. So two separate questions, but thank you so much.
Great, thank you. So to answer just the definition of welcoming, I think that it is, everybody has their own definition of what welcoming is, and I think in order to be able to start that process of changing, whether it's systemically or institutionally, it's really having that conversation of what does welcoming look like. And so that is one of the things within every department or division, or a lot of the departments and divisions are having those conversations of that grounding work of when you say welcoming, what does that look like, and what have you seen that have created barriers for folks or may not be inclusive. There unfortunately is not a technical solution for what welcoming looks like or even race and equity work, so that is the foundation of starting these conversations. And as I think about even just that regional work, that's part of race and equity. And so some of the things that I have done or folks have partnered with is really looking at our neighboring cities. I am part of a cohort with Bloomington, as well as St. Louis Park, Golden Valley, and Richfield, and folks that are leading racial equity work in their city meet and really discuss about what are some of the things that are coming up, how can we partner together, because with race and equity work, it's not just a silo. And it's also provided me opportunities for partnership with them as well, really thinking about that with the impact of demographics. It's not only impacting Edina, but neighboring cities. And so those are the things that I'm currently working with, as well as where we share information as well. So that's some of the things that are being done. Thank you.
Quality of life survey results coming in closer to the census results, given what has happened with the timing on the census, if there is a difference between what the census shows for equity, for diversity in the community, will there be a look at the methodology used for the quality of life survey to see that in future more diversity perhaps is captured among respondents?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think as you're asking that question, I think of a couple things that come to mind, especially with data. As I said earlier, is that with the data of the quality of life survey as well as the census, it is self-identified. And so really looking at, even with the quality of life, it's asking the person whose birthday is closest to the month that this was received. So there are potentially gaps of what does that look like. And so not all data, especially when it comes to race, is statistically proven. And so when, for example, when the quality of life survey is being created or looking at past results, folks from the city take a look of what does this question mean? What does this response look like? And really what is the use for that response, and not just asking questions just to ask questions, but really having a purpose of that. And so I think that if there is a discrepancy in the census as well as the quality of life survey, staff members will definitely take a look at that, because again, the quality of life survey as well as the census data are one of the foundational driving forces with race and equity to be really responsive of who is in the community. Thank you.
Few words about that?
Sure. So this year in 2021, we oversampled to try to solicit more responses from non-white residents. We sent about 500 more surveys out, hoping to get a little higher response rate from people of color in the community.
And did you get more response? Okay, I'd like to revisit a little bit Carolyn's question about low-income housing. I mean, it was really surprising to me that we embrace everybody but low-income people, which means that you can be Sikh, and if you make a lot of money, we will accept you, but if you're low income, we won't. How is that being addressed? I mean, with low income housing projects and other things.
Thank you. I think with some of my experience, I know that I've had conversations with the affordable housing development manager and really unpacking all of the things that are connected to what people think of low income housing. I think, as I stated earlier, it's having staff members being able to build capacity within themselves and really look at the different structures that we have. And so is there a systemic issue or challenge? Is there an institutional? Is there interpersonal things that may be occurring where, folks have a different perspective of what low income or low income housing may look like and what it should be. And so it's really having those initial conversations and then helping support affordable housing and just, making incremental change. I know that, that has been a topic of how to be able to support low income housing. And so it's a work that needs to continue.
Thanks. I was just wondering what you might recommend for community members who want to support this work, if there's things that we can do more directly as individuals or to support the programs, the things that you're working on, what advice you might have.
Great, thank you so much. In my time in Edina, I feel that folks that have supported the work have contacted me and provided me input. And for those folks, it's just going ahead and being vocal about that, because when I think about race and equity work, again, for me, it's stemmed in how to be responsive and how to be adaptive. And so as community members, certainly give me a call or email me and just see what your feedback is. One of the things that I also think about too is how are folks growing in their race and equity work? And that could be a professional development aspect as well. It also could be continuing the conversations, clicking on the stories we share on Better Together Edina, as well as even going ahead and just starting that interaction with staff members too about race and equity work, because that also is a foundational piece of how to be able to build capacity as an entire community, and not just the city, but the entire community. So that's one thing that I would recommend is start those conversations. Thank you.
That might be all the questions we have tonight. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for our Town Talk. If you can continue to ask questions and participate in the discussion online at the city's bettertogether.org discussion for the next week. The online conversation closes on Tuesday, August 3rd. Our next Town Talk will be at 7 o'clock Wednesday, September 29th, and our new fire chief, Andrew Slama, will host that Town Talk and will tell us about his observations about fire operations and fire response. We're doing a lot in that area right now, so that could be a pretty interesting Town Talk. You can watch online or on Edina TV, or come in person to City Hall that night. This has been our return to live Town Talks. And with any luck, we'll be live on September 29th too. So thank you for coming tonight. Have a great evening. Good night.
Thank you.